Hey art fiends, welcome back to the channel. It has been many months since the last episode in this series. I said in the last video that if people liked it, I have many more old characters I can give a redesign treatment to. You guys really enjoyed that series, which means I am here to continue it. I have 3 more old characters for you this time. Just like the other videos, I will give a bit of background to the characters and describe what I did to them while a time lapse of me drawing plays. Since making the last video, I've started to script out all of my videos, even these more informal ones. So these videos should hopefully not be 50 minutes long anymore. A little bit of context before we jump into this, in case you forgot or haven't seen the 4 other videos in this series. These are all characters I designed when I was around 13 or 14 years old. I just started getting more into drawing around that time, and these characters were part of a comic I was creating. The short version is that these characters come to our universe from a parallel one. In the other universe, everyone has animal parts as well as a superpower of some kind. They can also hide their animal parts when in our world so that they can blend in, but they need to transform back in order to use their powers. Since the other universe is more of a medieval time period, I decided to use D&D classes as a jumping off point to help me give them all new outfits. The classes I pick are more based on their personalities and have little to do with the powers that they have. It was a good shorthand for me to get outfit ideas that will fit each character. Well then, let's jump right into the first of our characters for this video. First on my list of characters to redesign is Sobo. He is part lizard and he has the power of time travel. Sobo was always more of a stoic and serious type. His power was very rare and had a lot of sacred history behind it, so he takes everything very seriously. He was one of my few darker skinned characters, but what I considered dark at the time was limited to the single color pencil that I had to color things in. For his class, I decided a paladin would fit him well. Paladins tend to be more strict in following the rules and guides that they have set out for themselves. I also think the heavy armor would be very fitting for him. He was always supposed to be more on the larger side, but back when I was 13, I had no idea how to draw anything that didn't look like a stick-sized person. I should also let you all know that this isn't the first time I drew this character recently. A few months ago, I drew some trios of characters from this group of OCs, and Sobo was included in one of them. He is the third in the group of Kinu and Shuki, 2 characters I redrew in past videos. However, in that drawing, he was just a human, so I never did anything past designing his face, hair, and body structure. So going into the design here, it was more about figuring out what his outfit would be when he is in his half-animal form. I started with the base for the pose. I went with something very simple and still, since Sobo is the calm and collected type. With a pose set, I went into the actual design process. Like I said, the face was already figured out early by me, so I knew what I was going for. My idea when I first recreated his face was I wanted something that really showed off the personality I was going for. His original design had nothing that showed how calm he always was in the way his face was structured. He is also much more broad than before, since he was always more of a protector, so I went for a lot more rectangular shapes in the design elements. The rest of the body was straightforward, just a more wider and boxy shape for his stature. I did question what I wanted to do with his right hand for a bit, but in the end I stuck with my original idea and had it outstretched slightly. I will be adding something to represent his time travel powers later on. Next was adding in the hair. In the original for this character, he always had very short hair. However, he also had this odd spiking happening in the back of his hair that was supposed to be representing the spines on the back of a lizard. I was never really sold on this idea even back then, so when redesigning him, I just scrapped that completely. I think he looks way better with just the very short cut. I then added in his tail, remaking it a bit from the old version so it seems more lizard-like. Moving on to the outfit, now is when all the new things were really happening. Using some paladin drawings as reference, I added in the shoulder plates since those are a common staple in this class. The chest plate was next, again matching it to the reference but keeping it simple for my own sake. One of the references had a fur collar around the neck. and I really like this idea for Sobo's outfit. Since his species doesn't have fur, it kind of makes it seem like he won that fur from someone else who did have some. A spoil of his battles, if you will. Moving on to his arms, I gave him some gauntlets over his arms and hands. Then it was on to the legs, where I gave him very large leg armor that goes up to his mid-thigh. I made sure to separate pieces of the leg armor so he would be able to walk. The final part was the waist. I didn't want to give him any sort of long cape or fabric of any kind. Not only do way too many characters have something like that already, I wanted him to have the smallest amount of soft material as possible on his outfit. So I gave him the large armor plates on the sides, connecting them with 2 crossed belts. I also decided to give him a medal in the center of the belt, which I will later turn into a symbol that represents the family he is from. So, with the sketch done, I added the line art. At this point, I refined a lot of the design to something more readable than what my sketch showed. I also decided on the symbol I would put on his armor at this point. In the original story, Sobo's family was the only ones with the power of time travel. They were sort of like a special tribe of people who were the only ones with this sacred ability. Since he was already in armor, and a lot of paladins tend to wear a symbol representing whoever they're aligned to, I thought adding something that represents his family and their time travel ability onto his design. I came up with a sun and a moon, showing the passage of time in a symbolic way. One half is the moon and the other the sun, and in the center they come together into one complete symbol. Finally, I added this floating clock under his hands as an indicator of his power. We are now moving on to the colors. Because I drew him before, I did figure out the new colors for his hair, skin, and eyes already. His original color was this kind of olive, which was the color of his hair. Like I said earlier, he always had darker skin, but due to me only having 1 shade of brown of color pencil, I could never make him darker than what he was at the time. With a computer, I can now make his skin the shade that he was always meant to have. So his skin is much darker. His hair is still in that olive territory, but it's more on the green side, since he was closer to pure green to begin with. Like many other characters I had at the time, he also used to have bright red eyes. To differentiate him more, I made them a bit more on the brown side, as well as making them a lot darker than they used to be. Moving on to the new things, his armor is a shade of silver, since it is made of metal. I gave it a bit of a green tint too, to relate it to the original green he was colored. I then went into coloring the symbols. His original design had a bright red as an accent, so I wanted to continue this into his new design. I thought using 2 different shades of red, a light and a dark, to differentiate between the sun and the moon would be a great way to incorporate this. Next was his undershirt. I went for a black so it would help the light colored armor stand out more. I then used a brown for the belts. I end up using a lighter shade so it would be more visible against the black of the undershirt. This brown was also used in the tie around the gauntlets as well. I then moved to the fur on the collar. I went for a lighter version of his hair color, trying to get more greens into his overall palette. After looking at everything together, I decided that the light green I had chosen would work a lot better as an accent color on the armor than the reds I was using before. This helped emphasize that the reds are not a main color and helps the reds pop out more on his design. I then took a bit to play around with the hues and saturation of some of the colors until I was satisfied with the overall look. Lastly, I added a bit of color to the clock, coloring the line art to make it look more transparent. And with that, we have finished Sobo's new design. So, here is Sobo then, and here he is now. Next up is a very different character than what we've seen so far. This character is not from the other world, meaning that this is a full human. Her name is Ruri, and she is our main character Kumori's adoptive sister. Although she is a human, she gets wrapped up in the animal fights because of her brother. She's very feisty, an act first, talk later kind of gal. Because she is just a human, she can't transform into a part animal form. In my old comic, she would go around with a baseball bat as a weapon for fights. I did pull up a picture of a rogue, since that would definitely be her class if she ever had the fantasy outfit. I will be putting her in clothes that we have in our world, but with clothes that are an interpretation of what a rogue would be wearing if they were more modern. Getting into her drawing, I started with her base pose, wanting to include the bat and also show how she is not afraid of the fight she's getting into. So I posed her with an arm on her waist and another holding the bat over her shoulder. With her body done, it was time to design her. Her hair was always the most interesting part of her original design. She had flat bangs and bushy pigtails. I wanted to keep that same general idea, especially her original pigtails. I updated her bangs to be a bit more side-swept, but kept them flat like before. Her pigtails moved from being at the sides of her head to now being pulled up at the back, making them a bit more like a split ponytail than two separate pigtails. Moving on to the clothing, with the rogue outfit in mind, I gave her a big sweatshirt. This represents the cloak that the rogue is wearing in the reference image. The legs were where I got a bit creative. I wanted to find a way to interpret armor, but with common modern-day clothing instead. Ruri was into sports in the old comics, which is why she was so good with the bat. I also depicted her playing soccer at one point as well, so I thought a great way to interpret armor would be with the guards different sports players wear. So I gave her both knee guards and shin guards to represent some modern day armor. I contemplated whether she would wear shorts or pants for a while, but I decided to go with shorts and very high socks. Mainly because the knee guards would be a lot easier to get on over socks than they would over sweatpants, and I wanted the guards to be visible and not being covered by her pants. Lastly, I made her shoes into cleats, fitting with the sports vibe, as well as being a shoe that will give her better traction when in a fight. Moving on to the colors, I again want to stay close to the original idea as to not stray too far from where she started from. One of the references I was using of her was one I drew back in 2014 when I was in college. The colors I used there are what I was going for back when I was young and drawing her. I did end up darkening her hair a bit from that old version, however, since the lighter shade wasn't working very well with her skin color, the shades being very close to each other. She did always have this dirty blonde hair color, so I wanted to stay in that general area. Her eyes are a similar case, where I wanted to keep them green since that was always her color accent. I did darken them up a bit, trying to make them a bit more neutral since she is just a plain old human. The bat was next, and this was pretty straightforward. I wanted it to be a wooden bat, so I went for a light brown that didn't clash with her hair too much. For her clothes, I wanted to go with some darker colors than what she used to wear. The clothes I used to draw her in were always super bright, and since she is supposed to be out at night fighting in these clothes, I didn't think such a colorful outfit would be very practical. She wore a lot of reds in the older drawings, so sticking with that, I used a black with a red tint for the knee pads and shorts. The shorts have kind of become more like spandex, relating a bit more to the sporty outfit she is wearing. Next, the shin guards and knee guards had silver added to their protective parts. Her sweatshirt became this dark red, relating it back to the jacket I used to draw her in. These four colors basically became all of her colors, adding them to her shoes and socks as well as accenting them where needed. I also added a lighter silver stripe to the socks, further showing that these are meant to be socks. With that, Ruri comes together to make a lot more sense for a human character fighting with all these super-powered beings. So, here is Ruri then, and here she is now. On to the last character for this video. This happens to be another character I drew as part of a trio drawing more recently, so just like Sobo, he already has some thought put into his design going into this recording. This character is Eske, and he is part dog. His power was that of disguise. Basically, if he painted onto your face, he could make you look like anyone else for a short period of time. He's a very spunky character, but also kind of ditzy. He's not the smartest in the bunch, let's just say that. But he's very excitable and friendly to everyone. The trio drawing he was in was with Reiki and Ankoku, the three of them being best friends. Because his ability has to do with the arts, and he is just a very friendly character, I went with a bard for his outfit. For his pose, I wanted to show off his excitable personality, but also have him holding his staple paintbrush. Since I had already designed his body features, I went in knowing what they would look like. His hair wasn't anything unique back when I first drew him, but he always did have this big head of hair. I was just unable to draw anything curly or fluffy at the time, so when I went to redesign him, I went for that big fluffy hair. His dog ears are also different from before, making them in a similar fashion to how I made Reiki's. Moving to the clothes, bards wear a lot of big flowy capes or cloaks of some kind. I didn't want to give him too revealing of an outfit, which is also something common for bards, since that wouldn't fit his personality very well. But I did think flowy garments would look great for him. He was never really a fighter, more of support, so his outfit wouldn't need to be made with fighting in mind. So looking at the references I had, I gave him this shorter cloak on top with a tie in the center to hold it together. For his bottom half, I went for the split fabric that is also long and flowy. This gave him 2 layers of different lengths. Because the bottom half was split, I wanted to have that be sort of a cloak he is wearing, so the split would continue to his top half as well. He also has a belt in order to hold it all together. His pants were going to be some basic puffy pants, no armor since, again, he isn't fighting too much. I also planned some leather boots for him, also giving him some long leather gloves to match his arms to his legs. Lastly, I planned for a very simple pattern on his outfit, just some edges to the fabric to highlight the different parts. Going into colors, I knew what the body colors would be due to having drawn him already. His white hair was always what made him unique, so I kept to that color. I did make it more of an off-white this time, since using pure white is never a good idea. It makes it harder to add highlights to the color, and it also can look a bit off, especially when there is pure white behind the character as well. His skin stays white. I just made sure to make it a shade that wasn't too white so it wouldn't clash with his hair. His animal parts were always brown, but in all my redesigns, I decided that the animal parts would all match with the hair color so as to not make it so strange. So now that his ears and tail were going to be white, I didn't want to lose the browns. So the brown now became the base for what his clothing would be. His eyes were always brown as well, so this kept that color in his body design too. Moving into the clothes, I go through a lot of variations of brown. For the leather parts, I use a darker brown to represent the material that they are made of. Although I did want brown, I also wanted to keep some of his white theme as well. I realized giving him lighter shades to his outfit would not only help the leather stand out, but it would work a lot better with his overall pale look. I end up going with this almost gray brown and a lighter brown for his cape pieces, the colors on these 2 parts being inverted from one another. For his shirt and pants, I went for this almost white color, relating it back to his white theme. I also used the dark brown for the belt and added in a gold for the clasps in his cape and belt. The brush was the final piece, keeping it brown as well since brushes tend to come in that color. I added a little light green paint on the tip as something unique that stands out against his very neutral colored outfit. With that, Esuke's new design is done. So here he is then, and here he is now. That brings us to the end of another OC redesign video. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I love making these and reminiscing about these characters I made when I was young and new to character creation. If you liked this video and haven't seen the other parts of this series, please go start from part 1. There is a whole lot more characters I did this to, as well as more information about these characters and the world they inhabit. I'm going to try and make more of these videos now, since I have many characters left to go, so it shouldn't be months until the next part of this anymore. Next time we will be looking at more villain characters, so be sure to subscribe to know when that comes out. In the meantime, follow me on Twitter and Instagram to see more art from me, both of these characters as well as a bunch of other stuff. Those links are in the description below. With that, like, comment, share, and subscribe. All the things that the YouTubers say. Peace!